So I will call the Willington Board of Education Curriculum Committee to order. It is 7:05 p.m. on November 17th. We only have 3 items on the agenda called order. We're done with that. Review science curriculum and adjournment. I'm just going to kick us off. Obviously, I sound wonderful, so I'm not going to do a lot of talking if I can. Katie Richling and Aaron Conley are here today. Dr. Conley, sorry, are here today to go through some science things with us. I just shared my screen and changed it. Can you still see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I don't know what you've had the opportunity to see or not review. The intent of tonight is not to get things out to prepare to send to the board. This is really just like we did with the reading curriculum. The purpose is really to do a kickoff to show you how the layout is, all that process. You have access to these folders here, and then come back next time with all sorts of questions. If you have some questions today, obviously that's great. But I wanted Aaron to kind of go through the process again of what's there and why it's the way it is, and answer some questions just to give you the format, and then come back for real specific things next time. Make sense?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, Aaron,
All right.
and I'm going to mute myself, and you're in.
All right. Thanks. Let's see. Screen. All right. So I wanted to start with the calendar that we shared with the board, and kind of map that to our work here. You can see the predominant focus this year is the phonics and math through the school year. And then middle school science. And then I'm going to talk about elementary science a little bit tonight too, and share a couple things with you. But so we have 4 meetings scheduled for this year. So as of right now, I'm going to give you the overview, but I'm going to include some elementary information in tonight, even though we're going to really delve deep into the middle school units and the middle school program. December, we'll talk more specifically about the units. February, we'll review the font. I'll give you a phonics overview, and hopefully at that time, because phonics aligns so strongly with reading and writing, which has already been adopted, that I don't think the overview would be too deep. That we might be able to do those together, but if not, we could split those up too. And then April, we're going to start to I'll do the math overview for the math program. So that's kind of our tentative agenda as we look forward through this year for this committee work. So here is the scope and sequence that our kindergarten through 8th grade are following for this school year. You'll see, and this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about elementary too. So kindergarten through 4th grade, they intersperse because remember they have to do part science, part social studies. So you'll see each one of them has 4 science units, and then they have around 3 to 4 social studies units. So the empty blocks are for social studies, and the blocks labeled here are the science units. Predominantly for elementary this year, we're using mystery science as our core for kind of a placeholder until Open SciEd, which is using our middle school, releases their elementary. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. And then 5th through 8th grade units, 4th and 5th grade have half a year of science and half a year of social studies, and 7th and 8th, you'll see here mapped out, have a full year of science, and then they also have social studies as a elective, or a special, I should say. So you'll see that those units mapped here. Down here are all of the units for elementary, kind of just outlined there. So that's our scope and sequence for this year, and that is on my. So I wanted to give you a look at mystery science. So here is the mystery science website. These are example of the kindergarten units. You'll see here, these are what we follow right here, these 4 bubbles. So when they're learning about animals, they can go right into animal secrets, and they have the lessons right here for them. The nice thing about mystery science is, although it's not as comprehensive and as rigorous, I would say, as the Open SciEd curriculum, it does really align with NGSS and the 3 dimensions and the idea of kicking off with a very engaging inquiry or phenomena. So it is nice because it starts to get the kids prepared for that more rigorous of Open SciEd, the Open SciEd curriculum, which you're going to delve deeper into. Let's see here. Let me go back. And are there any, just before I leave mystery science, does anyone have any questions on mystery science or want to see anything else here? All right.
Aaron, this is a temporary hold, correct?
Yes, correct. It's so that elementary is still getting science. It's aligned with the state standards and three-dimensional science teaching and learning. But it is just a placeholder until hopefully what passes for science. The curriculum I'm going to show you in a minute, Open SciEd, releases their elementary units. So here's our district science folder. Just so you can see the components. We're going to again go back to that in a minute because I want to explain. So here's Open SciEd. What Open SciEd is here, and they talk a little bit about themselves here, but it is an open resource or open source science materials. That means it's been funded usually by the government, which means it's open SciEd, but it could be any kind of funding provided it, but the constraints to that money meant that it needs to be free for anyone to access. So that is what open source means. It means, and also there was a conglomerate of 10 states you'll see here that have been researching this. Each unit goes through about a minimum of an 18-month process, which you'll see in a minute too. And middle school units are still being released, but a majority of them are done. I think there's only 2 more middle school units that are still in process of being done. They are not standalone units. They really are coherent. And so the idea of keeping this as a program, which is why I'm going to advocate this eventually goes, when they launch their elementary, that this eventually goes K-8, but they do put so much thought into their coherence and spiraling that I do think it's going to be really important that we bring this down to kindergarten when that comes. To give you an idea of what an Open SciEd or three-dimensional classroom looks like, I wanted to play this video. Let's see if I can.
So if I squeeze it, is it more similar to the paper or styrofoam? Squeeze it. I don't use it. It's terrible. Conductor. Some of them are conductors. Most of them. Tell me why that's important to know about other things. So like how fast they move, how slow you want your mouth to so want it to like run as slow as possible, so I get like materials that take and like and then you're complicated and stop and so we thought that metal cups would be fairly fast, but I agree with something with former. I mean, there's no air. Yeah, but let's do that plastic. Plastic. Then I think it would be a worse performer. Yeah, because it's clear and very yeah. So we'll put that in the so plastic.
Can you tell me why metal is a good conductor and why it didn't keep your liquids cold? Can you explain that a little bit?
It's solid, and solids, the atoms are like this, and so heat can insulate and travel through the atoms like one to another. It's like they're right on top of each other. If you look really closely, it just looks like a layer. Yeah, layers of this. If you look super closely, where it's tight, it's like awesome. Don't really mind. And maybe it's trying to look up to facts about things and try to put them together. It's not a little debate. And then eventually, sometimes with people that are like this grade, don't know, they don't exactly get it quite yet. And so you kind of want to show them facts. So I did that one.
All right. Let's see. All right, so that was an example, kind of a snippet of what an open-sided classroom looks like. Katie, I'm going to ask you to come in if you do want to add anything to that video, since you've been kind of living the curriculum, or in terms of maybe the shifts of the classroom with the curriculum, with this new curriculum.
I would say this is my 8th year at Hall and the 3rd curriculum that I've worked with since being here. The first curriculum I worked with, I'm fairly certain is the same exact one I had when I was a middle school student there. I actually found my name in the books that we had used. And while that served a purpose at one time, it was very just factual and memorization, memorizing information and regurgitating it back. The second curriculum we had used with CREC, we just found so many gaps in it. And although there were pieces of it that were helpful to us and many hands-on experiences and fairly aligned to NGSS, I'm finding with this new curriculum, Open SciEd, it's so comprehensive. It has all the elements of everything we need. And I'm just seeing so much more from my students, even following COVID, where we're seeing so many gaps in things. I'm finding that my students are just having such valuable conversations. And just as in the video that you saw, I'm really taking a different role than I was with previous curriculums. I'm very much a facilitator, where I'm guiding students through and having them develop their own questions, and just being a resource to provide the materials that they need or the information they need to help them get there. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, I'm just finding so much success with it so far, that I'm very excited to see where it goes. I just finished our first unit and I'm starting the second one, but I think that video really does capture what's happening within our classrooms, which is very student-centered. So I'm very impressed with it so far.
Thanks, Katie. So the next is one thing I want to share is the instructional model. The reason this is important is because you'll see these in our curriculum documents. So the instructional model that Open SciEd follows is everything is launched with an anchoring phenomena. And through this, what they call a storyline, which that phenomena is that it inherently, that storyline, it goes throughout the unit. These are the different routines the kids engage in throughout the unit. You have the anchoring phenomena routine, driving question board, navigation routine, putting pieces together, navigation, investigation, putting the pieces together, because that's when you have all the information, have to make sense of it. Problematizing, and then usually you have to put the pieces back together after that. And then again, they kind of will repeat some of these steps in terms of investigation, navigation, and then they'll always culminate with the putting pieces together in consensus discussions. So you'll see these reflected in our curriculum here under routines and procedures. So I just wanted you to have that background. So when you saw these, you understood where they came from. And then I think here we are. So it does have the storyline. It engages kids in all of those steps. And then I think, here we go. And so why not elementary school? Before we go into the middle school units, I wanted to just say, because they haven't released elementary yet. Middle school is just getting complete. Here's the timeline for the elementary units for the same program. So it was launched, they just went this fall, actually, is when they're starting the research and the piloting of all of the units. So here they're looking at having some units fully be available by 2026, but they're going to start releasing units in a year from now. 2 years from now, we'll start to see some of those elementary units getting released over. And usually they release them in around 12 to 16 months is usually their time frame, and they're releasing. You'll see here kind of who's leading this work with Northwest, a bunch of universities. But that's the elementary release schedule for Open SciEd. So now going back to our units. So here is our science. We're going into a 6th grade unit 1. You'll see a very similar look to all of the ELA units, where we start with the unit 1 description. So here you have the standards, but not just the standards. More importantly, for next generation science standards, broken into these 3 dimensions. The 3 dimensions being the science engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, and the disciplinary core ideas. What's nice about, again, how comprehensive this program is, they tell you what pieces. You'll see here's a standard that is targeted, but you'll see those crossed out pieces are not targeted in this unit. So it targets part pieces of a standard, but possibly not the whole piece. This could come in this likely, knowing OpenSide, comes in a later unit. So they begin to build foundational skills that they'll build on again later in an additional unit. They also will go through what these standards look like for this particular unit and where the kids are engaged, which lesson they're engaged in it with, and what it looks like very specifically. Here's the resources, again, similar to our other units, the resources that are needed. I'm going to repeat, because this is a open source material, all of the teacher plans, everything is free. What is not free are the kits. So we do, you do need to usually you could go to the store and get all the materials, but it's much easier to order kits. But the actual teaching and learning guides are all free, but we do have to print them out, but they, once done, you are not purchasing any curriculum. And then here, just going back to the routines and procedures that we went over, and I showed you earlier kind of where those came from in terms of the processes and routines they go through the storyline. We outline all the vocabulary in the unit, and it is highlighted. Earned means kind of what they really work for, the ones that they're really struggling and grappling with. This is very interesting. You do not pre-teach vocabulary in this new way of teaching. You really let the kids, this is an equity component to kind of get everybody on the same level. But for instance, in the training, instead of you're not allowed to use the word air molecules until everyone in the room understands at a very concrete level what an air molecule is. So they make an analogy of an air puppy and how they kind of just bumble around and bump into things, so that no one, even if a learner may not have the language, they can still enter the conversation without vocabulary being a barrier. So that's what those earned words are, those words that kids really are not allowed to use until at a very concrete level you can prove that you understand what they are and how they work. Encountered means they just kind of, throughout the unit, they talk about it, but it's not necessarily the focused words, but they do come encounter and have to use the words. And then reinforce. So these are previously taught words that they should already know, that are also used.
Aaron, you should probably do some sort of quick definition introduction of those concepts in the beginning.
Which one? The vocabulary?
Earned, encountered, reinforced.
Okay, you mean
Just like
in
you just
here,
explained it.
like here.
I don't think it needs to be there. I think it's, if this is at the start of the curriculum someplace.
A rationale.
Yeah. Why, you have what is earned, you have the actual concepts in there, but just explain what that earned means someplace in the document.
Okay.
Real simple.
I think to add to that, I'd say, yeah, so a rationale and the idea that students need to experience first to build the concepts before they put a label on. That's, the whole idea.
Yes.
Right? The pre-teaching vocabulary, there's nothing to hang the words on. So the experience, and then that develops the concept. Once they've got the concept, then they can add the word. And that's as you said, well, all of this is a very different way of teaching than any of us experienced as students. And, our parents have never experienced this. So it's going to need a lot of explanation of the change in instruction and the idea of the 3 dimensions also.
But that would be in like a I'm for teachers.
Right. Yeah. I'm thinking of explaining it to our
for
parents
sure
and families so that they understand why their kid's science looks really different from what they had.
Absolutely. No, and even just the whole process of teaching and learning, the role of the teacher, as Katie pointed out. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely going to be education, like definitely educational, lots of resources. I actually have a bunch too, so be helpful. Next we have the assessments. So again, very specific to these. Some of them are cross units, so like driving question boards and all of them. Generally all of these are, but this one is usually specific. So this is the one-way mirror phenomena routine, phenomena where they have to explain with a model how the one-way mirror works and why one person can see themselves and the other person can't. And then this is what the unit, kind of the lesson sequence looks like. So you'll see lesson 1 doesn't mean one day. Lesson 1 is actually 4 days, but they do say that the days are allotted in 45-minute blocks when you look at the discussion on Open SciEd. But you have the lesson question. Here is exactly what the kids need to kind of, at the end of the lesson, what do you expect them to come away with? It's these 2 bullets right here. So in here, they need to come away with some materials can be reflective and see-through at the same time. And then whether the material is reflective or see-through, it may be related to where the light is. So that kind of leads you to that next question of kind of the role of the light. And so here's the PEs that are addressed during that lesson and how you're assessing those PEs specifically. So what you're looking for and what on each day, it'll go by day too. And so that's just what this looks like. Sorry.
Katie, in your, short experience so far, are you seeing direct connections to the state science test?
Yes, I think something that has been really helpful in addition to this, because I'm definitely seeing it with this, especially the analysis of data, but also Gizmos has been extremely helpful. Our students are not used to the format of taking tests online, especially with science. So we've incorporated Gizmos into a lot of that, which has been really helpful for them to be able to see that online. But the analysis has been really big. Looking at data has been really big. Analyzing graphs, all of those things. I'm seeing so much more of that in this curriculum than I saw before. So I definitely see it being helpful in that aspect for sure.
So you're an experienced teacher. Do you think we need to highlight some of those things in here for a new teacher coming in?
What do you mean?
Just like, I mean, we know for the most part the concepts that are on the NGSS test for 5th and 8th graders, right?
Yep.
So should someone like, hey, big flag here, pay attention. This is an important concept that kids are going to be tested on, or is it just all the way through? It doesn't really work that way.
I think it's all the way through. What Jess and I have really been doing, the 8th grade science teacher, is finding things through Gizmos or through our activities that carry through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and really making sure that we're stressing those things. So I think the relationship between all the science teachers, our vertical time, we've been doing a lot of that. I do think it might be worthy of putting it in there when we get more experience with this curriculum, really highlighting, as you had mentioned, the big pieces of this that we need to stress for those tests.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have to prioritize one dimension, it's science and engineering practices. So this is your biggest and most, they're all important. But
no, I agree. And we talked about that all the time. I think science 10 years ago, we're really focusing on those disciplinary core ideas, that content, but focusing on, as you mentioned, those SEPs more than anything else has been so important. I agree with you there.
And that, I believe, so like, then it just goes through the lesson by lesson, very similarly to the end, with ending with the final lesson, which is usually a large assess or performance task. Katie, I'm gonna ask you, put you on the spot again. Would you mind, you just must have finished a performance task. Do you want to kind of share what yours looked like for your last unit?
Yeah, so my performance task was for 7.1. Our focus question was, how can we make something new that was not there before? So that was a very open-ended question, but what we explored, the phenomena we explored there was looking at bath bombs and how bath bombs work. So my opening kind of ta-da for them was to take a bath bomb, throw it in water, and they're simply just writing down questions and ideas. You know, I noticed this, I'm wondering this, I'm questioning this. And that carried us through learning about physical reactions, chemical reactions, talking about how, you know, mass cannot be created or destroyed, all these big topics you talk about in science. So our performance task allowed us to look at another phenomena where these types of reactions were also happening, but students were able to apply their understanding from what we learned about bath bombs to a new concept. So as we talked about before, we're really not focusing on students memorizing stuff. I don't care that they can regurgitate back to me that there's physical and chemical reactions happening in bath bombs. I want them to take their understanding and their knowledge to apply it to something else. So we looked at elephant toothpaste, which the kids obviously have all seen before and loved. And they were able to explain to me exactly what was happening. They were able to explain to me what ingredients in the elephant toothpaste caused the chemical reaction. You know, there was an exothermic reaction here, and that proved that there was a chemical reaction going on. There was a color change here that proved that there was a chemical reaction going on. So it was very rewarding for us all to start with something as simple as a bath bomb that we've all seen before, and them being able to apply their understanding and that knowledge to something else, which is exactly what this curriculum is doing so well. So it was a successful first unit, and we're off to a good start with the second one. So I've enjoyed it so far.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm going to pause there and ask if there's anything anyone wants to see and look deeper at, like with on my screen, if you have any questions, if clarification. Basically an open mic.
Erin, when I tried to get into the lessons, I somehow ended up in Spanish lessons. It was in Spanish. Could I see a lesson?
From the website?
Right, even
Or-
how about 7th grade, since we're talking about that?
All
You
right,
know,
so-
just see one of the, I noticed there were all the lessons that went
This is
under.
the teacher. You want to see the, so here's one lesson. What,
Yeah.
this, what Katie was just telling us. So yeah, there is Spanish in here also.
Oh, it's
It
in
is.
2 languages?
Yeah, yep, they do have
Oh.
Spanish also.
Okay,
So if you go down here, so do you want to, this is the kids version. Or do you want to see the teacher side or the student side?
teacher side. And how did you get it to go to English?
Just scroll down. Spanish.
Oh,
is
it's,
about-
English is under the Spanish.
yeah,
okay,
that's how it
okay.
downloaded.
Okay,
So here's a lesson teacher view.
okay. Yeah, that's good. That's,
And then they go through to figure out the lesson plan. So this goes like kind of your breaks your timing out.
mhm.
Materials.
Can you go back to that for a second? This is an important budget note. You can be ultra cheap using this program, these units. But all it does is create havoc in the office
Mm.
and havoc for the science teachers. So it's really important, and I'm going to advocate for this. You're going to see this in the budget. 2 things. One, that you are purchasing the science kits, that you don't send Katie to the store to buy clear plastic cups and then, oh, I need eyedroppers, and that's just craziness. We got to get away from that. So we're purchasing the kits. That'll be back in the budget. And the second thing is that Katie mentioned earlier was the gizmos portion of this. That's a separate cost as well, that we're finding critical, that is a budget item as well, that really goes hand in hand with this. So just, I always like to tie the money to
Mhm.
what it looks like here. And those are 2 things that are really important. The other thing, and I'll be quiet in a minute, but the other things that I wanted to point out, Katie didn't use the word portrait of the graduate, but holy cow, this is like portrait of the graduate. It's not memorization. It's the problem solving, it's the communication, it's understanding process. That's all of our portrait of the graduate work. So that's like a line throughout this. The last thing I think is important for you all to know, and I think Katie's living this year. She doesn't have a full head of gray hair yet, but she very well could by the end of the year. Katie, can you talk about the lab prep?
Yes. Can you actually just scroll down a little bit, Erin, so I can give a better sense of what this looks like? Right there is perfect, just up a little bit. So as Phil mentioned, those kits have been instrumental this year. I have felt very successful with this curriculum and obviously enjoy it very much, but I feel like my hair would be gray right now if that was not the case. So these kits have become very handy. For example, today I did a demonstration in which I'm pulling, 10 different items out of a box that are there, they're labeled, I know exactly where they are to get started. In addition to that, you'll see at the top here, materials preparation, 120 minutes plus 60 minutes of drying time. This is for one lesson. So the prep for these is a lot of work and takes a lot of time, but having those materials there has been extremely helpful, but it is very time consuming. I will say that I don't think I would feel as successful this year if we did not have those half days and the chance for professional development to learn this stuff. It's been very helpful. So thank you for your support in that. But it is very time consuming. So that is one thing I am finding with this, that it does take a lot of time. I think that was your question, Phil.
Yes, pretty sure.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So there's materials and this is actually really important. This is really part of that the navigation routine. So these are written so strategically to get kids to ask the right kind of that next question. And so that's kind of, this is really what this outlines is like, so what are you focused on and what is not? So like, how do you as a teacher facilitate this discussion in the way it needs to go? Because this is very inquiry based, true inquiry. And a lot of people get concerned where, well, you can land anywhere. Well, you don't if you follow this navigation routine and kind of really understand what you're targeting and what you're not. The nice thing about this section, it also tells you why you're not targeting that and where else it might be addressed further down the road in terms of where you're not going. So, and that's, I think, oh no, and then you have the very specific, everything is so detailed. So this is the bath bomb.
So it may make sense. Obviously, you may have questions tonight, but just seeing this layout and how detailed it is, I don't think this is like a wordsmith thing for you. If you go back to your other section, Erin, where this part that you've written in, where it's this, I would say this is probably more of your target if you're looking through some of these things, but this is also straight from that resource.
Yeah. And so understand when you look at it, well, we are just looking at, this is different unit, but you were looking at the overview of that one lesson, which we just scrolled through. So it'd be equivalent to like one line item in the curriculum document.
One line. That's great. So questions regarding any of this concept, the layout?
So I'd just like to add my voice to yours as far as getting the kits and not doing the Walmart run on a Friday evening to buy all of the consumables, because I definitely spent a lot of time doing that. And also the gizmos I actually use gizmos with my elementary science methods class today to do simulations. Gizmos are a wonderful resource. So, and I think Open Science Ed is a wonderful resource. So I'm completely behind you on this.
As I was going to build, thank you for bringing up the gizmos again. I meant to say, so also looking at for next year, adding gizmos to 3rd and 4th grade as well, and infusing that into with their mystery science. Gizmos is very much with the new NGSS test for Connecticut. They do simulated labs on the new test. So Gizmos is the perfect resource for helping build that capacity with students, because even if they're used to labs, being able to click and navigate an online simulation is very different. So it does get them used to that, and those are definitely items on the new test.
So that should be in your budget for next year, Aaron.
It is.
I saw further down, maybe on the other document, mention of science notebooks. So I think that might be, when, and I know, I mean, the documents are for the teachers, but as a Board of Ed member, I'm looking at how we are presenting this to the community. I have to say that's one of my lenses here. And I'm thinking science and engineering. Oh, and that was the other piece. So science and engineering notebooks are really important, but you haven't talked about the inclusion of engineering and NGSS, which is another completely new piece to science instruction.
Yeah. So, and those are inherently built into the units. So the performance tasks, when there's an engineering, I'd have to think of one. All the ones I know are elementary that I can think off the top of my head. But they're worked into the unit. So the unit performance task is typically an engineering design task. So the phenomena usually relates to that, but the engineering design tasks are weaved into the curriculum as performance tasks. In this particular, but I'll look for you, and I can actually, when we do present this to the board, I'll make sure that I include one like that though, Laura.
To explain how it's integrated, that this is, completely new. None of our parents have experienced having engineering incorporated into science instruction.
Yeah.
And Laura, I can speak to that too. The unit I'm currently doing, 7.2, the second unit, they're designing their own flameless heater. So we're exploring ones that are already done. They've created their initial models based off of just what their background knowledge and what they think they know. And we're working towards changing those as we learn a little bit more. I mean, we're day 4 into it right now, but I can keep you updated on what that looks like. But it is certainly an engineering heavy unit, our second one in 7th grade.
I've had experience with that one. So when I was at the STEM school, we were heavy into the engineering piece. And did, as you said, flameless heaters. So I'm so excited to see this, well, NGSS is just amazing. I mean, I'm a disciple.
I am too. Any other questions? Want to see any other pieces? Clarity? All right.
So the question now then will be, Aaron, if you want to stop sharing.
Yep. There it is.
We were planning on sometime in December. And I don't know if we have that date set or not. I don't.
I believe we do. Brenda sent them to me. I have them right here. December 15th at 3:45.
Perfect. So will you be ready to discuss that the idea is that we're bringing 5 through 8, I believe, Aaron, we would want you to be on board with 5 through 8, which is all those documents there. And that's what we would then bring to the board after that. Do you think you'd be well prepped for that December meeting to answer questions and be ready to make a recommendation and feel settled at that point?
I think so.
Now that I know how to see it in English.
Might have taken you a little bit longer with the translation, right?
I just thought it was a Spanish lesson.
It's our new world language program.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Science in Spanish, yeah.
Yeah.
I did wonder if the link was going the wrong place because I had the same problem.
So as long as, you'll just have to let me know if it's too much and you just want to do 5, 6 as we get closer and I post the agenda, just let me know. If you think we could do 5 through 8 in one sitting, and I think it's okay to send Aaron directly comments ahead of time, and you have access to those documents. but those are live within the district, so don't make the comments within the document, if that makes sense. Just send her an email and you can ask questions ahead of time. That might expedite the conversation.
Yeah. Especially if there's any themes, I could then kind of really call them and speak to those too.
Yeah. Okay, anything else?
One last question that I just thought of. What about science literacy incorporating nonfiction, trade books and all? As we didn't talk about that as we were looking. Does Open Science Ed give recommendations, or is that something that you have?
So funny that you should ask that question. I actually, this was a really celebratory. I was very excited. The last PLC at the elementary school, all of their next units are nonfiction writing units, and the teachers were so excited because let's see, first grade through fourth grade, all were able to tie in science standards. So every single one of them are doing science content, they're reading science books, doing informational reading, and then producing some kind of informational writing piece that are targeting science standards. So that's all these unit 2s are very integrated, first through fourth grade, and the teachers were so excited about that integration.
Laura, are you talking about 5 through 8?
Yeah, I'm wondering now 5 through 8. I think that's
Oh, right,
great,
okay.
elementary, and now I'm wondering 5 through 8.
So, Katie, we have not. I talked about the iteration in a sense. So, like, we just finished ELA. The teachers are piloting ELA. That integration is going to next year. That's going to be that focus. That exactly what I talked about just happened in elementary is really going to be our focus next year at middle school as the teachers get trained in PBL, because that's going to be that natural integration piece. And the teachers right now are all learning kind of their individual curriculums. We are in 2 different places, the 2 schools, in the sense of elementary school, the teachers know all the curriculum, so they know how to do that integration. Where the departmentalized at the middle school next year, as they meet more in teams and they're working in grade level project based units, that's where that's gonna gel and really come together.
Yeah.
But I will say they do informational reading throughout the units as well. So sometimes instead of like, a hands-on lab to find an answer to a question, they provide them an article, or they provide them, some kind of digital reference that they need to review. But
yeah, I will say it's very writing heavy as well, more than I've seen in the past. And we still do pull, even like Newsella, sometimes we'll have relevant articles that I might pull as like a warm up for something for the kids to have a chance to look at. So it's still very writing and reading heavy, as you had mentioned, but as Aaron mentioned, as we get through this, we can then start to incorporate more of that in there. But there are several articles in there that we, read through and annotate and take the time to really dive into together.
So, and again, I'm constantly thinking about communicating. So incorporation of literacy with nonfiction reading articles, the writing piece of it, but also NGSS is incredibly discourse heavy. And I think that's, again, something completely new to having students learn how to argue with evidence. So another thing to kind of highlight when we present this to the community, that, science isn't just reading out of a book, answering questions, or even doing a cookbook lab, which, many people, they did labs, but it, just follow a thing, more inquiry based with students coming up with their own questions, finding the answers, but then sharing with each other, creating arguments and having to back it up and all that good stuff. So I'm just focused on the things that people have not experienced in this new that we need to highlight and really promote, because this is what makes this type of science so incredibly impactful.
And I think, Aaron, was I having the conversation with you how I had mentioned that I saw such improvement in my students' ability to talk to each other? even beyond the science, just being able to have a conversation with someone around something that you disagree with. And Phil had mentioned bringing in the portrait of a graduate work here. It was the perfect opportunity to do that. But students are taking such ownership in what they're doing because they are actually performing the lab work, that just being able to argue from evidence, their evidence, I'm seeing such improvement. So that, I will say, has been a drastic improvement from the curriculum that I've seen before, is their ability to talk, not only write about it and read about it, but to talk about it and to explain logically exactly what's going on. And as you had mentioned, argue from evidence. So I'm seeing tons of evidence of that for sure.
And change your mind.
Yes, yes. And it's okay
Which
to
is
change your
really
mind.
important.
Yeah, and we have talked about that. It's okay to change your mind when you're presented with new evidence.
It's good.
Yes. Yes.
Love it. Okay, sorry, I could talk about this all night. All right, I'll stop now though.
No, all really good points. And they're going to be really important too as we roll out to the community.
I mean, that's, yeah, like I said,
yeah.
that's my lens.
Yeah, I think
I've gotta
that's
read
gonna
the
have to be the
document.
background, Aaron, right? When you go to the full board, to identify what those big shifts are, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's Laura's point.
Yep.
So, all right, well, it's gonna be on you now to do lots of reading and provide any feedback to Aaron, and we'll come back there in December. You have about a month. If you have any problems accessing anything, let me know. We'll get you in. If there's any themes, like you said, don't wait, because Aaron can insert some of that stuff or explain it away prior to the meeting. And then we could just talk about it. Other than that, anything else?
I'm just super excited to see 7th and 8th grade getting science their whole year. Because looking at those units, boy, would they be missing out if you only could do it for half a year.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks all for doing a 7 o'clock meeting. Katie and Aaron, thanks. You're beyond your hours. I greatly appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you.
And if you're good, we can adjourn at 7:52.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.